war on Palestinians. Mark Regev is the senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom. Ambassador, very good to have you. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you a little bit about this move on the part of Turkey to recall your ambassador to Israel, or their ambassador, I should say. What's going on here? Do you know?
Turkey, unfortunately, refuses to call Hamas terrorists. And we'd ask anyone, what do you call people who shoot babies in their cots? What do you call people who behead? What do you call people who enter civilian houses and just machine gun the family that they find? What do you call people who murder parents in front of their children and then murder children in front of their parents? What do you call people who burn people alive? What do you call people who herd young music goers at a concert into a ravine and machine gun them? Is there another word?
Having said that, even with all of that, and you're quite right, it all erupted 4 weeks ago this very day, sir. We have these protests, all pro-Palestinian. First of all, later today in Washington, D.C., a big one in London, a big one in Paris, a big one the other day in Lisbon, Portugal. We've seen them in Rome. We've seen them in Athens. We saw another huge one in Iran. No shock there. But it does raise an issue. I wonder if you consider, Ambassador, whether it's justified or not, that you're losing the PR war. It's as if that what happened 4 weeks ago never occurred. What do you say?
I think some of the protesters just disbelieve that Hamas did these crimes. Yes, it's like a form of historic revisionism. And this is only, as you said, 4 weeks ago. They deny Hamas's atrocities, at least some of the protesters. But let's look at the content of what they're saying. Gaza has been ruled by Hamas now for 16 years. And what have they got to show for it? The people of Gaza suffer. The people of Gaza have rampant poverty. The people of Gaza live under an authoritarian terrorist regime. Surely people who have the real interests of the Palestinians at heart should be supporting Israel in our campaign to destroy Hamas, because if we succeed, and we will succeed in eliminating Hamas, that's not just good for Israel, because that will bring safety and security to the people of southern Israel, who won't have to live in the constant fear of these brutal terrorist massacres like we did on October 7th. But that's also ultimately good for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this autocratic extremist terrorist regime that doesn't give a hoot for their well-being.
You know what people forget, and I'm glad you pointed it out, Ambassador, this idea of blaming everything that has been going on horribly in Gaza on the Israelis. They gave up that control, complete control of it 15, 16 years ago. And this has been a Hamas-run area, country, zone, whatever you want to call it. So whatever their beefs with the way Palestinians have been treated and what they're enduring is on Hamas controlling it, right? I mean, and yet the message you get in these worldwide rallies is that this is all on Israel, and this response to this terror attack is disproportionate and mean and ruthless. What do you say?
Well, first of all, you're 100% right, Neil. I mean, people forget that Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005. There is no Israeli control of Gaza, and they use this word occupation out of reflex. Israel doesn't control the Gaza Strip. Hamas, unfortunately, controls the Gaza Strip. That's why we've had all the problems. But to all the people who want to see peace in the Middle East, they have to understand something else. They have to understand that Hamas has been and continues to be the most bitter enemy of peace and reconciliation. Because Hamas says my country, Israel, has no right to exist, not in any borders. Hamas says that any Arab who negotiates or signs a peace treaty with Israel, heaven forbid in the Hamas opinion, yes, is a traitor to Islam and to the Arab world. And you know, Neil, what they think has to be done to traitors. And finally, Hamas says every Jew is a legitimate target for murder. And so if you believe in peace, one has to understand that Hamas is the bitter enemy of any peace and reconciliation here in the Middle East. And in defeating Hamas, I hope we can create some space for more pragmatic voices to fill the vacuum.
You know, I know you're a bit busy, Ambassador, pay attention to chants of those who are not fans of yours or Israel's. But one we heard on a bus of ralliers getting together for this big Washington one is that from the rivers to the sea, we shall be free. What they're talking about is the eradication of Israel. There's no other way to interpret it. Your thoughts?
100%. If you say from the river to the sea, they mean from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan.
Right.
There's no room for compromise. Israel must be destroyed. And I don't know what they want to do with all us Israelis. Yes, we can only presume the worst. But people who chant that sort of slogan are not interested in peace. They're not interested in dialogue. They're not interested in reconciliation. They want to kill us. They want to destroy my country, and they are my enemy. And I think they're the enemy of everyone who wants to see peace in the Middle East. And they're the enemies of the only democracy in the Middle East. And what they're proposing instead is anything but democracy. If they're supporters of Hamas, they want to see a theocratic autocracy that subjugates women, destroys human rights, and is the enemy of all the principles that your society and my country are based on.
You know, you talk about Hamas being eradicated. The goal here is to just take them out. I don't know how far that goes. But at the very least, it's going to put Israel in a tough position. And who runs Gaza? How is Gaza decided? Hamas likes to claim it was the duly elected forces that fellow Palestinians had put in power there. We all know that those elections were not exactly, shall we say, on the up and up. Having said all of that, what would Israel's role be then in Gaza? And would it pick and would it enforce governments more friendly to Israel?
Look, we're only in this war because it was forced upon us. We didn't initiate this conflict. We're responding to their attack on Israel when they invaded us on October 7th and butchered our people. But war has been forced upon us, and we'll win it now on our terms. There is no substitute but victory. What happens afterwards, we're already having preliminary discussions with the Americans, with other good friends and allies, about what we want to see in Gaza afterwards. I can say the following: Israel doesn't want to stay there permanently. What we are concerned about is we want to make sure that when this is over, we'll have a situation in Gaza where there is no longer a terrorist organization that is capable of committing the sort of atrocity we saw on October 7th. That's our number one goal, and we believe that'll be achieved when Hamas's authoritarian and dictatorial rule of the Gaza Strip is finally ended.
Are you comfortable Egypt, and particularly Qatar, having a role in deciding that region's fate? And I say particularly Qatar because a lot of Hamas lieutenants and operatives live in Qatar, and yet Qatar is being praised for opening up this Rafah passageway to allow some to get out, and now we discover some Hamas militants to get out. Do you feel comfortable, Qatar, in a position, particularly Qatar, to decide this region?
Neil, once again, you're correct, because in Qatar you have the leadership of Hamas. They live there as the guests of the regime in five-star hotels, eating in very fancy restaurants in their very expensive suits. Yes, that's where Hamas's political leadership is. Now, the Qatar people say, well, we have this dialogue with Hamas, and that brings good things, you know, that we can get good things from that dialogue. And so far, I would say getting 4 of the hostages out of over 240, that's pretty pitiful. And I'd say to the Qataris, you say you could make a difference. Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and so far the results have been minimal. And if you're hosting Hamas, one has to ask a question: would you host Al-Qaeda? Would you host ISIS? And if you think hosting this terrorist group brings benefits, well, you have to prove it. You have to show it. We have failed to see anything significant.
You know, I'm not telling you numbers that you don't know inside and out far better than me, Mark, but Jews represent about 2.5% of the population on this planet and account for close to 70% of the harassment and attacks. How do you feel about that?
Unfortunately, anti-Semitism has not died. My father was a survivor of the Holocaust. And after the Holocaust, there was a feeling that maybe, you know, humanity had learned its lesson, that people would finally understand where this very ancient hatred can lead, and that anti-Semitism would be discarded on the ash heap of history where it belongs. But that's not true. Unfortunately, we've seen across the globe a resurgence of anti-Semitism in the last couple of years where Jews and the Jewish state is blamed for everything under the sun. You see it on the extreme right, you see it on the extreme left, you see it amongst the radical Islamists. Hamas, if you read the Hamas Charter, it's not an anti-Israel document only. It's very much an anti-Semitic document. It talks about Jews perverting the morals of young Muslim women, Jews being responsible for the world wars and profiting, all this sort of conspiracy theory stuff out of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, that famous Russian forgery, anti-Semitic forgery. I think we have to understand, unfortunately, that the anti-Semitism has an amazing staying power and it has ability to metamorphosize and to become relevant for new generations of haters. It just means we all have to be more vigilant in seeing it and in fighting it. And as you said before, when people chant from the river to the sea, yes, Palestine will be free, they're actually saying that my people, the Jewish people, have no right to national self-determination. They want to destroy the only Jewish country on the planet, the only country where the Jews, yes, where the Jewish people have national self-determination. What's that all about if not hatred for Jews?
Ambassador, it is wild stuff, and these are wild times. Mark Regev, thank you very, very much. Be well, be safe.
Thank you very much, Neil.
All right, we have a lot more.